Hey everyone, and welcome to Hit the Apex this week. Ahead of the German Grand Prix, we're back for a couple of more races before the mid-season break. Another double-header, as it is with the German Grand Prix returning to the calendar for the first time since 2016. We have that. We've got Supercars to talk about as well a bit later, and all the little lovely bits in between. So thank you for joining us as always. I'm Jawad with Baden. So we've had 1 week layoff in between races, and now we're back into it. We've got 2 more races before the mid-season break. Hockenheim, I guess, returning to the calendar, a favourite always, and a pretty crucial race as well when you think about it, with it being Sebastian Vettel's home race as well as Mercedes, the team.
Yeah, well, this final little prong we've got before that looming break, the way it seems to creep up so quickly, but I guess we're re-energised after what's felt like a bit of a anomaly there with that weekend off. We're so used to that, I guess, triumvirate of Sunday nights, the late ones if you're down under, so it was probably nice to have a breather, and these last two can really decide who does enter that break with all the momentum. And who knows about this one? It's just so bizarre the way it's a biennial event essentially, so it's really hard to get a read on who's going to be superior.
Yeah, well, this is the first time we come to Hockenheim with these new aerodynamically superior cars and whatnot, with the last time 2016 we still had the old aero and whatnot, and I guess ever since we've gotten into the turbo hybrid era as well, we've only been to Hockenheim twice out of, I think now we're in the 5th year of that hybrid era. So yeah, to only have been there twice before, it's hard to get a read, as you say, of course, but both times were Mercedes victories, of course. Nico Rosberg in 2014 in front of the home crowd, and then Lewis Hamilton in 2016 with that masterclass as well. So it's been a Mercedes track. They've got the Mercedes grandstand there. You were saying perhaps this weekend we might see some big news from Mercedes as far as driver announcements and contracts are concerned. So yeah, it's a bit of another Mercedes fortress that Ferrari find themselves at, as they conquered in Montreal and Silverstone. Could they do the same thing here in Hockenheim this weekend? Sebastian Vettel, he's never won at Hockenheim before actually, even though he won the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, that classic race in 2013, which was an epic. But yeah, it's all for him to play for this weekend.
Yeah, it seems like one of those circuits which isn't really a strong suit for him, but on the basis of Ferrari's form, as we've discussed probably in the past few editions, the way Ferrari sees that really away from Mercedes, the momentum you see in previous years, there's reason to believe, and with the tyre treads going back to how they were just the default instead of the ones we've had for like Spain and France and then Silverstone, where Ferrari got themselves a win against the grain, you could say. I think that no reason to think Mercedes will be walking away from it, and this would be a huge blow if Ferrari, after what they did do to Lewis Hamilton personally a fortnight ago, to get a victory in front of Mercedes' home crowd here, that would really swing things away from them.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a question that we've asked and talked about over the past few weeks, is whether Ferrari has the best car. Indeed, it's a power circuit, you could say, with the long straights and everything, and Ferrari, I guess everyone says, has the best power unit now. So,
and remember, we're heading to Hungary the next weekend, where you could say it's going to suit Ferrari, so for Mercedes it's pretty crucial they snag one here.
Yeah, exactly, before that mid-season break. But Ferrari on the outset, I guess probably the most successful manufacturer in Germany when you combine both or all the venues that they've had the German Grand Prix at, with, of course, Schumacher's success with Ferrari in the early 2000s. He'd be winning all the races that they'd have on the German Grand Prix circuits. But then when you look at their last pair of wins at Hockenheim in particular, so 2010, that infamous race, I guess, with Fernando Alonso, and Fernando is faster than you, Felipe incident, and then of course 2012 as well, which was, I think, Alonso's last win from pole position, I believe, in F1. So they were the last 2 times that Ferrari won at Hockenheim. So certainly this year could be one to have good fortune for those guys.
Yeah, I think just for them, they're probably going to be happy just to be right up with the Mercedes, and then on Sunday you again see, as much as Hamilton pulls those laps out of the bag in final qualifying. If he gets a poor start, as you did at Silverstone, not that any of his fans will let you believe it had an effect on the result there, then Vettel's got reason to be very confident.
Yeah, well, it's another short run to the first corner at Hockenheim, like Silverstone, and 2014 was the year we saw a bit of carnage there between Felipe Massa and I think it was Kevin Magnussen in the McLaren at the time, and there was a lot of words said about that. So, yeah, it's pretty tight going into that first corner. Then you've got the drag strip all the way down to turn 2, and then again that long straight coming out of turns 3, 4 and 5, so plenty of overtaking opportunities you'd think as well, but for Ferrari and Mercedes, if we can see the same thing we saw at Silverstone with the four-way battle there, that would be something epic. But let's talk about the other cars. Kimi Räikkönen, he's been on the precipice, you could say, of perhaps snagging a win, whether it's looking whether it's looking closer than it actually is or not, but, Austria certainly seemed like that. Silverstone, could there been a chance? Could these next few races, because you always talk about Belgium being that opportunity for Kimi to win. What about even Hungary? Because he's been really strong there in the past. I don't think he's won a race in Hungary, has he?
He's been second probably 6 times.
Yeah, like Bahrain, he's been second there so many times, but never quite won there. Germany as well, I think he won here back with McLaren back in those days. But is he really close to winning a race? We'll see. But Valtteri Bottas is another one who, it's hard to believe that second P2 is his best result this year so far, given the fact that last year he was so strong. He's had a pole position this year as well. Back in 2014, he was P2 here for Williams, which was a strong result. So, it's a strong circuit for Bottas as well in many respects. So could we see him perhaps go for the win this weekend too? So there are some of the variables in that, I guess, overall title battle. It might not just be between Lewis and Seb, but we could see perhaps Kimi and Valtteri in it as well.
Yeah, I think as far as results, not so much performance-wise dictating those roles within the team, I think that they've already decided that Hamilton and Vettel respectively will be the ones duking it out for title honours. So it'll be interesting to see how much strategy and team favouritism comes into the equation now that we're really getting to that pointy stage of the season, and particularly from Ferrari's point of view, after what they went through last year, they'll be completely behind Vettel, making sure every point is accrued. And I guess we did see, though, conversely at Austria, when they allowed Raikkonen to hold on to that second position, that at least they're going to do it in a fair way. It's not going to be this explicit case of just hauling Kimi back and letting Vettel go straight past him when he's clearly looking like he's got a shot at victory.
Yeah, exactly, like we've seen in previous seasons, of course, between the Ferrari drivers, of course. So, looking at the tyre choices as well, so same compounds for both Hamilton and for Vettel there, 2 mediums, 4 sets of super softs and 7 ultra softs. So, they're going, I guess, nip and tuck as far as that sort of stuff is concerned. So trying to stay on an equal footing as much as they can. So it'll be interesting to see who gets out. And again, those softer compounds have favoured Ferrari a lot throughout the season, even though at Silverstone they were still pretty strong when it came to using those harder tyres. So Ferrari, it's hard to look past them as being the benchmark at this stage.
Yeah, when they get everything right, it seems as though they just emerge on top, and it's a testament to how far they've come. They're not 100% of the way there yet. That'll only be after they've won a title that we can say they've completed the resurrection, but it's certainly made things a lot more interesting rather than seeing any pressure, and then Mercedes just goes to a whole new level.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Mercedes and Ferrari for you. Where do Red Bull, though, sit amongst the leaders? And you could say that at Silverstone they really lacked the pace behind those two guys, considering, Silverstone traditionally was a Red Bull circuit, but now given the fact that, you could take the lap 80% of it flat out, now with more power, Red Bull's deficits really showed up there. And again, this weekend, it's a power circuit, so perhaps Red Bull might struggle there. Well, even though last time out they actually had a double podium finish, Ricciardo and Verstappen together, and those famous scenes of Ricciardo and the shoey back in 2016.
Yeah, again, you never know. I guess based on what happened at Austria, we didn't foresee Red Bull getting a victory there, looking very competitive as it was, and maybe a few of those slower corners, the hairpins, might just work to its advantage rather than the almost clear-cut, very much minimal through, cops and maggots and all of that you saw at Silverstone, where they had no opportunity there to play to their strong suits. Maybe this time it'll keep them a bit more ballpark. Whoever's P2 might have a bit of a fight on their hands.
Yeah, so, if something goes wrong at the front, of course, Red Bull will be up there, but, on pace alone, it looks difficult for them to actually be in contention. And quickly, too, on Daniel Ricciardo, it looks like he might be taking grid penalties as well, tactical grid penalties at that for this weekend, so that already will put him behind. But then again, for future races, for Hungary in particular, where Red Bull are quite strong, it could be a good idea for him to take those penalties now to get the new power unit into the pool, and come Hungary, they could be a force.
Yeah, I think the signs indicate that perhaps even though Ferrari and Mercedes have their own battle for major honours, that Red Bull at particular circuits such as Hungary or Singapore, they could have the best package on a weekend, and it's something that they've got to look to and just maximise those results, and it might be just playing a smarter long game if they finally take that penalty, particularly for Ricciardo. We thought he would have taken after Monaco, so he's done well to reach this far, but he's probably been a bit quiet, a bit anonymous since that point, and he'd probably rather ride off one where he's not going to be fighting for victory here and just give it everything at a circuit he's got very fond memories of a week later.
Yeah, exactly. At Hungary, of course, going back a few years ago, 2014, that special win there. But overall, Daniel Ricciardo as well, still haven't heard anything in regards to his future. It looks like he might be staying at Red Bull now. That's probably the consensus in general. So, again, it's sort of fizzled out from all that hype that he could be off to a Mercedes or a Ferrari. Or does he take the leap of faith and go to perhaps a McLaren or to a Renault, where a long-term project or whatever, he could develop the team? So, yeah, staying at Red Bull probably the safest bet now.
I think, as much as it's a bit disappointing, we all thought that he had that potential to be at one of the really big two. He's going to have an opportunity now if Honda's really got its act together to capitalise on it, and I guess you discussed a while back that maybe in the long run it's something for him that he might actually benefit from into whatever these new regulations, whenever we do find out which shape they do take, it might be the best call for him to stay put.
Yeah, the new regulations, a whole nother story, which we'll talk about another time anyway. But looking at the midfield now, Renault and Haas, I guess, perhaps the battle of intrigue now, with Haas having caught up to them in the last few races as well. Renault debuting a new front wing, which they say will be the last front wing update they have before the new changes for 2019, where they're going to be simplified. So, could that be what gives them that edge to hold off the likes of Haas? But Haas saying, they're concerned that the final sector, the slow corners that they have in that stadium section, is going to expose their car's weaknesses. So it could be an interesting battle between those guys. And Romain Grosjean, again, we talked about Silverstone, how he just basically threw away a good result. They both were going to be in the top 10. Magnussen scored, of course, but Grosjean again, 1 point scoring finish all year, even though it was a remarkable fourth place he had. Still, it doesn't hide the fact that everywhere else he's just been a total failure.
Yeah, that clock is ticking again, and that speculation does pick up. There are several candidates now waiting in the wings, so he's really got to do something before that break just to shore up some momentum. Otherwise, he'll be probably the central talking point over that summer hiatus, because we see all the top teams now seem secure. He could be, I guess, the one who shakes up the midfield outlook for 2019. Yeah,
well, that Haas seat probably the most desirable it's been right through ever since they came into Formula One back in 2016. So, it's definitely going to be a target for those midfield guys to look at. If Renault's off limits as well for next year, then surely someone like a Sergio Perez has been talked about, or Charles Leclerc, if he doesn't go to Ferrari, for example, does he go to Haas, as you keep talking about, for a year of development? It's definitely a target for anyone. And Robert Kubica as well, as you just told me before we came on air, could be looking at, if Williams is not on the cards there, to get a properly competitive drive for next year. Haas is probably going to be the target.
Yeah, it's credit to them, as much as you can see there again with that one-car operation most weekends, that that lure is really starting to be realised, and Kevin Magnussen, his stocks have really been bolstered to date, so he'll be quite content knowing if they continue this development curve that there's some really good potential, I think, for perhaps podiums into next season.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see how that all pans out. But for the rest of the midfield, Force India, McLaren, Likes of Sauber, do they get a chance to fight for points this weekend? We must ask also, when will Brendan Hartley's luck change as well? He's had unreliability and crashes and all sorts of stuff sort of hamper his charge over the last few races in particular. We thought after Baku, where he scored those points, his first points in F1, that would he be finally turning a corner, but yeah, it's just gone from bad to worst for Hartley, and unfortunately, with all that speculation about whether he's going to be on the grid as soon as the next race, perhaps, it just doesn't seem to go away. So you'd really hope for his sake, not that he's not a talented driver or anything, you'd hope that he gets some results under his belt to shore up that position in the team.
And you ally that with the news that Honda's essentially said to Red Bull, go full tilt with Toro Rosso for developing the 2019 power unit, and you wonder whether that's going to affect Toro Rosso in the back half of the season, and some of those results at Bahrain and Monaco will be as good as it gets for them, and Hartley will be stuck with a mule, much as he was last year with Renault on board. You think that it's going to be a real shame if he's just stuck in some testing bed for the balance of the season, and that's probably, as it stands, going to be the extent of his career.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not the way you want to look at it, but even still, if he's there as a glorified test driver, it's still unfair the way that the criticisms from, I guess, the big wigs above, chiefly in Helmut Marko, that that he saying that he's not doing a good enough job, even though he's probably at his limit there, as much as he can be.
Yeah, I think just some kind of breakthrough, just so he can hold his head high. It would be nice to see. He's always shown those glimpses. Maybe can't quite polish it off in a Q2 to get into the final 10, and then on race days is another story. More often than not, he just seems to be in the wrong place in the wrong time, but that, I guess, it comes back to qualifying further up the grid, and he's got clean air around him.
Yeah, getting further up the grid, as you say. And I guess also these two races will be the last chance for those off-contract drives to impress ahead of the holiday period, with the mid-season sort of the time where, those pieces start to fall into place, and then sort of Spa, Monza time after the mid-season break is when we see most of those announcements come. So yeah, last chance there. We'll see Antonio Giovinazzi in the Sauber this weekend as well, in place of Marcus Ericsson for FP1. So, could there be a chance that he's on the grid next year full-time as well? If Leclerc moves on from Sauber, there might be a position there for him, or do Haas take the punt on him as well? Who knows? We'll see. So yeah, it's going to be a good weekend, an exciting weekend, and again, a weekend where we don't really quite know what's going to happen. Ferrari versus Mercedes. Could Red Bull sneak one in? We'll wait and see.
Yeah, as much as you think it could be one of those weekends where Mercedes pulls off a quintessential display as they did until last season, at the same time, again, Ferrari, from what we've seen today, there's every chance they could just come out and really shake things up on Sunday, if not across the whole weekend, and that would be very ominous for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so, it's that time of year, it's quite crucial. We keep saying that, whilst Ferrari are ticking all the boxes at the moment, it's the second half of the year that we've really got to sit and watch them pull the things together, because they did the same thing this time last year, but then come the second half of the year, it all just went to ruin for them. So yeah, it's the second part of the year that I'm waiting for to see whether they can actually wrap this one up. It's just with bated breath. We've got to wait and see. But anyway, any win they can take along the way is quite crucial. So let's move it on into the digest then. And of course, we had the news last week of a technical shake-up at Mercedes with Aldo the Apache Costa being stood down from his role as being a technical chief there. He's sort of gone back into some kind of advisor role there. But yeah, Mercedes, I guess, not really wasting time. They're not in the dominant position they were this time last year or this time 24 months ago, and they're going to make the changes necessary to make sure they stay a front runner.
And probably a bit of future proofing ahead of, again, whatever that composition of the new regulations are from 2021, instead of having these guys who have probably done all they can, and they'll never be forgotten for their contributions to really the juggernaut Mercedes has been under the hybrid era since 2014. So it's the right moment to get them out the door and have a bit of lead time for these successes for 2 or 2.5 seasons, and whether they've got an eye on next season or again 2021, you can see based on what they did do coming into 2014, they were probably in for a bit of scepticism from those onlookers that they didn't have the right people or they had too many people in these positions, but who are we to judge after what they've gone on to achieve there?
Yeah, too many chefs in the kitchen was the talk pre-2014, and then when we saw that era sort of kick off, and then the next 3 years that came after that, certainly it was all justified with having all those different people, and I guess it all comes back down to Ross Brawn and the recruiting that he did do over those years leading into 2014, getting people like Aldo Costa, Toto Wolff, and the like. So yeah, it's quite crucial as to where they are today. But yeah, what you're saying, future proofing the team for, I guess, the next year or whatever, to ensure that they don't really drop off from being a front runner and a leading force in the sport.
Yeah, just a sign of a good organisation. These people know when the time has come, and it's good to see there's other talent. They've got the faith to give them that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. So let's switch over to two wheels then, and we had the last race before the mid-season break there at the Sachsenring over the weekend, and we had big news leading into the race that Danny Pedrosa's called time on his career. So his long career with Honda finally comes to an end at the end of this season. I guess we already knew that he wouldn't be riding for Repsol Honda next year, with Jorge Lorenzo taking that seat for 2019, but there was a chance that he could end up on a satellite Yamaha or at some other satellite team for next year. But Pedrosa, I guess the career he's had, long career filled with a lot of injuries and resilience as well. You know, he's really taken a beating in that little jockey frame of his, and he's decided he's only 33, I think, and he's decided to call time on it. So good on him for doing that, but also, congratulations on what has been a great career, which should have ultimately given him at least one Premier Class championship, which he's been the bridesmaid in so many times.
Yeah, he's probably akin to a Sterling Moss of F1, probably one of the best riders not to claim a title, and I think it's nice that he will conclude his career with that perennial association with Honda, and probably just the right call before he beats himself up too severely. He can go home and look on knowing he gave everything, and he was always against it with that diminutive frame, so he's probably extracted all that he could have hoped for from his own limitations.
Yeah, and then in recent times as well, having a teammate who is the freak Marc Marquez as well, probably didn't really help his cause, but to stay on sort of par with him for those first few years was, pretty good. But yeah, over the last few years, and then this year especially, it's sort of dropped away, his form. I mean, I think he didn't even qualify inside the top 15 for the German Grand Prix last weekend, and then the race, just don't even remember where he finished, unfortunately. So that's just sort of how things have come for Pedrosa at the moment. But yeah, it's a good time, I guess, to call on what has been a pretty good career in general, and pretty popular rider as well. But staying on the two wheels, and Marc Marquez, he's made it 9 from 9 at the Sachsenring. It's just like Texas, where he's been ever since that race came onto the calendar in 2013 when he made his Grand Prix debut. he's just dominated. So 9 victories from 9 races. He was unstoppable again over the weekend. We saw a resurgent Yamaha end up on the podium with Rossi and Vinales. But yeah, we talk about Hamilton and his fortresses over the Formula One calendar, but Marc Marquez to win 9 years in a row at the same venue in different categories, it's unthinkable. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, he's just one of those riders who goes to another level, and it's really down to him having a bit of a lapse of concentration. As you see in Formula One, certain drivers just own particular circuits, those characteristics, and that air of invincibility. As much as he's already looking pretty good for another title, these kind of circuits where it's almost decided before they even start the race, it just shores up his supremacy.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to four wheels now, and Formula E, the season came to an end over the weekend too, with the New York City decider Jean-Eric Vergne crowned champion. So we can finally call him a world champion. Unfortunately, another one of those Red Bull outcasts of Formula One that ended up in Formula E. He claimed the victory on the Saturday, of course, for the championship, and then actually won the race on Sunday to sort of just add the cherry on top of the cake for him. Audi ended up as the team's champions in the end. So, Formula E wrapped up another year. Next year they've got, this year, as I say, but next season they've got those new generation cars. You've got Nissan replacing Renault. You've got Felipe Massa coming in as well with the Venturi team. So another good season ahead. But yeah, Jean-Eric Vergne, credit to the guy to get one done.
And coupled with what he's done in Le Mans as well, he's really been able to see not F1 as being a step-off point from his aspirations, but he's gone on to greater things, and you never know, there's always those whispers of he could yet resurface at Toro Rosso, and that would be quite amusing considering probably the bitter terms he departed after missing out on that nod in favour of Daniel Ricciardo. But it's good to see that he's still at the top of his game, and for Formula E, it's good to have all of these expat F1 drivers who seem to accumulate the titles year after year, and you never know as far as Formula E does go. We've got Mercedes entering the sport in a season's time as well, and its stature only going to grow really, coupled with the next gen cars. It's going to enter that, or exit that embryonic phase at the least.
Well, the 4 champions that we've had in Formula E so far, Buemi, ex-Red Bull guy, Nelson Piquet Jr., ex-Renault driver, then Lucas de Grassi last year, and now Jean-Eric Vergne. So yeah, basically just all ex-F1 alumni there. So, it shows you that it's a category, I guess, for you to go after F1, or if you can't make it in F1, but still, it's pretty... it's not for us, as we keep saying, but yeah, it's still there, and it's still doing quite well. So we had Craig Lowndes come out also over the weekend and say that, or rather back up his retirement, saying that, yeah, it was his decision, despite all the talk and the chatter about the fact that he probably was sacked. If there was a better word to use, that, the time was come. So, believe it whatever way you want. If that was if it was his decision, we've got to respect that. But it's not really stopping people from talking about how it's probably the team decided to give him the boot out the door.
Yeah, it's always going to hang over his head when you think that someone with his status, he could call it on his terms, and it does make you wonder who calls the shots at Triple Eight. And we always know that Roland Dane is quite forthright, as much as he might afford Craig Lowndes that call to be his. You can see that there might have been some external influences, and I guess we'll touch on that shortly with the discussion, but it looks as though they might be playing the marketing angle as a motive there.
Exactly. And finally in the digest, no surprise after his outburst or antics at the British Grand Prix, but Santino Ferrucci's been dropped by his F2 team in Trident. So I guess, perhaps his single-seater career is all but over now, because Haas have cut ties with him because he was a junior driver for them. He got that 4-race ban, which I guess doesn't really matter now, because he's been dropped altogether by the team that he was fielded by for this season.
Yeah, surprised it's taken this long for all of his connections there to sever those ties, considering what he done was pretty carte blanche. There was no way of seeing it from a certain perspective. So whether he rebuilds his career in a distant future or that's the last we hear of him, and he's got his money, I'm sure that he can float in from his parents. They seem to be throwing the dollars around as they tend to do in those categories. Then he's going to have to obviously lick his wounds, and if he doesn't realise what he's done wrong, then you do wonder what kind of role he had in the first place, being on the path to Formula One.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess logic prevails in that instance. So let's move it on and have our little supercars discussion as well, which you sort of alluded to before. And the question is, who is going to be heir apparent to Craig Lowndes? And back when Triple Eight expanded to 3 cars in 2016 and Shane Van Gisbergen was brought into the Red Bull Holden racing team, there was a lot of talk, and Roland Dane said as well at the time that, the only reason I'm expanding to 3 cars is for Craig Lowndes, because he's our favourite son. He's, been the faithful servant to the organisation since 2005 or whatever. But we're at the stage now where, hang on, I thought we were going to do that, but it's like, well, the 3rd car perhaps is a valuable asset that Triple Eight and Roland Dane could still yet exploit. And now the attention after that retirement announcement has turned to who's going to fill that position at Triple Eight following the end of the year. And long-time talks from Holden themselves, the manufacturer themselves, is that they'd like to have a marquee female driver representing them. And this was the, the desire of the previous marketing boss of Holden, Mark Harland, who departed in March, I think earlier this year. The new boss hasn't really outlined the same thing yet, but could we potentially have a female driver in that car next year? And Simona Di Silvestro earmarked as the natural successor, and with a huge marketing prospect behind her as well.
Yeah, well, Roland Dane, he always knows an opportunity when he sees it, and he loves a dollar, so I'm sure that notion of the 3rd entry being exclusively for Craig Lowndes would shift to, we've got a seat vacant, and what a coincidence coinciding there with Nissan scaling back its commitments to supercars. You can see the talk of the clauses there for Di Silvestro, that it opens up that opportunity, and it does seem quite logical and give her an opportunity to really shine, where maybe in the current position where Nissan have been improving slowly but too little too late for the factory presence, that I guess at the same time she won't have the excuses if she can't deliver, but when she's in the really what's been the leading entry for the past decade, that she's going to have every chance at her feet there to go and get those podiums and victories that we've been hoping that she would deliver.
Yeah, well, at the moment, as it stands in the Nissan itself, she isn't really outperforming that machinery still. She's not at that Rick Kelly sort of stage, and I guess that will come with development. So even though putting her into that Triple Eight Holden is not going to immediately give those wins to her in the podiums, could it be a chance to further nurture and to hone her skill and have a better benchmark to come off? Not that the Kellys and the Nissans are not, against 2 recent champions in Van Gisbergen and Jamie Whincup, it could be a better chance for her to develop and find her feet in this category. Of course, this year she scored her career best result of 12th at Perth, so edging closer to the top 10. I keep saying Newcastle last year was probably her best performance, because she did really well in qualifying, sort of was closer to the top 15, but in the race she was just relentless with her passing, and also just not really showing a door to anyone. Even hard operators like Garth Tander were just, if he's as unyielding as he is, she was probably doubly unyielding with him. So it's really good to see her get the elbows out, and I guess just being caught up in those incidents at the rear of the field, it's unfortunate, but yeah, if she can qualify herself further up the grid, that would be great. And I guess getting that boost in the machinery will be a step, but herself getting those skills honed in would be really good to see.
Yeah, avoid those skirmishes. If she can be a regular top 10 qualifier at least, doesn't have to go winning races, but just building that confidence. And you'd think that by year 2 or year 3, if she signs a long-term commitment with Triple Eight, there's every opportunity that the investment will pay itself off.
But then from a marketing angle as well, I guess Roland Dane, as you said, has got his eyes on the dollars. Of course, she would bring with her Harvey Norman backing as well, which is, a pretty big player in the market, and they've had a long interest in, supporting female involvement in motorsport. And of course, they were the ones who gave for funded the wildcard entry at Bathurst a few years ago with Tickford. So, with that Harvey Norman going across as well, and just in general being a sort of beacon to promote female involvement in supercars and at top level motorsport, it's a really good thing to do, and really look forward to it if it comes to fruition.
Yeah, they've just got to start somewhere. It can't be an overnight build, so it might be another 2 or 3 years, and then we might see someone else crop up or really create that diversity where they're on the grid on merit, not just to push a certain marketing angle.
Yeah, so there's a lot of merit in it as well, as I talk about in an article I'm writing, that, it's not just completely a marketing ploy, but yeah, as I said, to further nurture herself, going deeper into the category and to perhaps become a stalwart, it's a great thing to do, and to do it with Triple Eight, who, as you say, have been a benchmark for the last decade and a half. It's probably the best thing, rather than, I guess, going out and getting a known entity like a Chaz Mostert. You were saying Earl Bamber perhaps could commit to Australia for full time, or someone like let's say Will Davison or David Reynolds to come over. So yeah,
and as much as the talk is there that it'd be a logical pairing for Craig Lowndes to link up with his old enduro partner in Jamie Whincup, he'd be invaluable if they placed him alongside G. Silvestro to further her development for however long Lowndes wants to remain on Triple Eight's books. Who knows if he gets a better opportunity down the track, but there's a lot of merit in that one if they don't see Whincup and Lowndes as the inevitable combination.
Yeah, as has been talked about already, and Paul Dumbrell saying he's happy to hang up his co-driver helmet if that's the case and everything. So yeah, well, we'll see and wait and see how that all pans out. But yeah, from not just a marketing angle, from a sporting angle as well, it would be really good to see Simona step up, and really just for her own progression in this category as well. It'd be nice to see her really become a category stalwart as well.
Yeah, I think it's hard in the current environment with Nissan. Clearly it hasn't fulfilled on that promise, and with the exposure she'll get through Triple Eight, that can really completely utilise what she brings to the series, not just through that angle, but from her own ability. Yeah,
exactly. So let's wrap things up then with our sporting moments of the week, and starting off with me, it's more so not really a heroic or bold moment. It's rather a humorous moment, let's say, which I saw last week in a one-day match between Pakistan and Zimbabwe. Now, we've seen Pakistani fast bowler Hassan Ali develop a rather interesting celebration technique for whenever he takes a wicket, but it sort of backfired on him this time, where he performed it right, and he ended up straining, I think, his shoulder in the process. So he does the whole thing routine, but then just falls to the ground immediately because he's done his shoulder, and all the guys are coming around to cuddle him or whatever. He's like, no, don't touch me, and you could see the image of their captain Sarfraz Ahmed walking over, trying to contain himself. So as bombastic as the routine is, it was just really funny to see him to pull a shoulder that time. But he's okay, hopefully. But yeah, that was probably one of the highlights for me over the last week.
Yeah, you got to take it in good faith, as long as it's not a long-term injury. Then
he'll think twice about doing that celebration next time, of course.
Yeah, we'll go back to just being docile and just like, business as usual, back to your marker, next delivery, who cares? It's only a big breakthrough.
Yeah, so it shows that every wicket is pretty important for him. But anyway, yeah, a little bit of humour, I guess, for me over the week. What was, apart from Collingwood losing, what stood out for you?
Yeah, I had to raise that one. Probably related to that, not directly, but that the talk when you get someone like a Nick Natanui who's gone down with another knee injury, it's diabolical for AFL when you've got that the objective perspective on the game instead of just particular club supporting, then you can see that that's a huge influence. And he had been back already this season from a knee and as good as he ever was beforehand, and now he's gone again, just one of those larger-than-life characters, and it just shows when they are cut down, these guys who are probably once in a generation, the toll that it does take on the sports image when it does struggle at times to cut through and talk of, I guess, AFL's relevance, the way that the game's played, then it's a big loss, and you can only hope that second time round he does the rehab as well as he did first time, and he's still got a future in whenever 12 or 18 months' time.
Well, that's, dent in, I guess, West Coast's prospects for a premiership this year, and I'm sure Daniel Ricciardo would have been grimacing when he would have woken up to that news wherever he was in the world, being the West Coast fan that he is. So, that's not good for them at all. But, you still ended up going down to them over the weekend, but still in a strong position, I guess, inside that top 8, is it, or top 6 now still?
Oh, they're still third.
So there you go. Yeah, I thought maybe the loss would have brought them down a little bit, given how competitive
it's pretty tight, but they're still third on percentage at least.
So there we go. That's one positive to take away from our injury-laden sporting moments of the week.
Just to keep it on theme, I thought I had to chuck that one in there.
Yeah,
we're being too happy about these ailments at the same time. It's a human.
At least with Hassan Ali, it's kind of funny, but with Nick Natanui, of course, repeatedly it happening, it's just not good to see. We really want to see him on the field and making an impact, as he always does when he does play. So anyway, that about wraps it up for today and for this week. So we've got German Grand Prix on the weekend, and we'll be back next week to wrap it all up, and of course preview Hungary before we go into the mid-season break. So thanks for joining us. Until then.